When Alexander Hamilton's enemies accused him of misusing the nation's money, what he uncovered to prove his innocence shocked everyone and forever stained his legacy. One of Hamilton's primary motivations was to rise above his station and make a long-lasting name for himself. This was especially difficult since, as per 18th century values, even his birth marked him as lower class. Born on January 11th in either 1755 or 1757, his mother and father, Rachel Lavian and James A. Hamilton, weren't married, making him and his older brother James Jr. illegitimate. Still, he wasn't going to let outside forces dictate his life. While Alexander was still young, the family moved to another island, St. Croix. Alexander's mother was still married, which prompted James A. Hamilton to leave her in 1765, as continuing the relationship would risk her being charged with bigamy. Still, she and Alexander were in for more misery as they both developed a nasty case of yellow fever. Although he would survive, his mother would tragically succumb to the sickness in 1768. Once he recovered though, he got right to work. A couple of years after their mother's passing, Alexander and his brother parted ways. James Jr. took a carpenter's apprenticeship. Quite on the other end of things, Alexander took a job as a clerk for an import-export firm called Beacom & Kruger, impressing the owner so much that he left the boy in charge for 5 months in his absence. Of course, this was only the first step to success. Further disaster came in 1772, but this time to him and the rest of the town of Christiansted, as a terrible hurricane rolled in and ravaged the area. Shortly after, Alexander penned a letter to his now estranged father, which ended up as more of an essay, or what some later referred to as a fire and brimstone sermon. This unexpectedly led to great opportunities. Alexander fell in love with reading and writing and displayed this skill in his letter. His mentor, Reverend Hugh Knox, read it and was so thrilled that he sent it to a magazine for publishing. As more and more people read it, they decided to start a fund to send Alexander to the colonies for more schooling. Finally, it was his time to rise. Alexander's means to pay for school didn't only come from the actual money his community donated, but also from cargo that he intended to sell. So, with his plans before him, he boarded a ship to America in 1772. He first arrived in Boston, then boarded another vessel to New York. There, he met a tailor named Hercules Mulligan who helped him sell his goods, and who helped him with much more later on, but more on that later. Now in the colonies, he continued to set himself up for major success. After spending a year at a prep school in New Jersey, Hamilton followed in the footsteps of his new friend and enrolled in King's College, where Hercules Mulligan had attended. While in college, he continued to impress those around him, with his roommate praising how intelligently and eloquently Hamilton spoke about current issues. He was just in time. The world around him was rapidly changing. During his time at prep school, Alexander became exposed to the revolutionary mindset, quickly becoming an advocate of the Patriots' cause. The American Revolution hadn't begun, but dissent was spreading amongst the colonists, and Alexander was vocal about his support, despite rebuking any mob aggression against the Loyalists. Still, he felt primed for action. Of course, it wasn't long before the American Revolution finally commenced, and Alexander knew he couldn't stay out of it. Spurred on by the inciting battles of Lexington and Concord, he and several other students signed up to serve with the Corsicans, a volunteer militia company in New York. From then on, he was right in the thick of it. In the summer of 1775, Hamilton and Mulligan worked together again as they fought against the British in Manhattan. Mulligan had joined the Sons of Liberty, and along with the Corsicans, they attempted to steal British cannons from the battery. Despite overwhelming opposition, including fire from the nearby HMS Asia, they were successful. Finally, Hamilton received a more official opportunity. Through his public support before the Revolution and valiant actions during the following conflict, Hamilton had met numerous prominent leaders. Seeing he was intelligent and capable, many of these men vouched for him, and the government soon commissioned him to create and captain the New York Provincial Company of Artillery. But by this point, Hamilton had many options to choose from. After a few more early battles, Hamilton continued to bolster his reputation until he received several promising requests. Generals like Nathaniel Greene and Lord Stirling offered him a position as an aide, but Hamilton had no interest in anything like that. In his mind, the only way to rise above his station was through physically fighting in the Revolution. Of course, there was one man he couldn't say no to. Hamilton may have believed he was fit for much more than being a mere aide, but that changed when he received an invitation from the highest in the land, George Washington. The president-to-be saw the potential inside Hamilton, who accepted the offer along with the rank of lieutenant colonel that accompanied it. This was no easy job, however. While the position of Washington's aide sounds like Hamilton was simply arranging appointments and getting the general coffee, he had to navigate many severe situations. As Washington's representative, he drafted his letters, negotiated with the Continental Congress, and issued orders in his name. In the meantime, though, it turns out he wasn't doing too badly in his personal life. Hamilton met many high society people, but not all were lords and generals. After a brief meeting once before, Alexander again saw Elizabeth Schuyler, the daughter of General Philip Schuyler. Although this was while Alexander was briefly stationed in Morristown, New Jersey, in 1780 they kept up correspondence after he left. Soon enough, they took the next step. After only a matter of months and likely a few lengthy discussions with Philip Schuyler, the two took things all the way. Hamilton and Elizabeth Schuyler married on December 14th, 1780, with her father's blessing. 2 years later, they welcomed the first of their children, Philip, and Elizabeth would have 8 children between then and 1802. On the flip side though, another friendship of his was growing quite strained. Although his position was one that many would gladly serve, Hamilton wasn't happy. He begged Washington to give him command in the Continental Army so that he might achieve glory in battle, but was only met with refusal. Tensions boiled over when the general admonished him in 1781 over something relatively small, causing a rift between them. Hamilton was relentless in pursuing a field command, going so far as to threaten resignation from his commission as lieutenant colonel. By mid-1871, Washington realized he had no choice but to grant Hamilton's wish, and gave him command of a battalion made up of several companies from the 1st and 2nd New York Regiments and Connecticut. Fortunately, he was just in time for the most decisive moment of the Revolution. In September 1781, the time came for Hamilton to truly prove his quality when the Continental Army planned to launch a siege of the British-held Yorktown. Leading 3 battalions, he and his men silently took Redoubt No. 10 of the British fortifications at night, only using bayonets to avoid accidental gunfire. This was integral to the American victory, and subsequently the end of the American Revolution. Up to this point, Hamilton's opinions of the Continental Congress and its new successor, the Congress of the Confederation, were mostly negative. He believed everything wrong with the governing body stemmed from a simple desire for power. Nevertheless, he was soon appointed the New York representative for Congress that July. Understandably, this wouldn't last. Unfortunately, Hamilton's criticisms and fear about Congress were validated during his term as a delegate. Financial negotiations between Congress and the various states had broken down, which led to several conflicts, especially with those in the army who hadn't received their pay. Hamilton strived for real change during the 1786 Annapolis Convention, hoping to fix the Articles of Confederation, which he saw as problematic. He envisioned a more effective federal government and drafted a report in favour of a constitutional convention, which included more state delegates so they could really hammer out the deep-seated issues. As always, he was very convincing. The following year, the Constitutional Convention that Hamilton had championed occurred in May, after multiple tries to reach a quorum of state representatives. Having served in the New York State Legislature, he became a New York delegate of the convention, chosen by his father-in-law, Philip Schuyler. Of course, not all of his ideas were well received. One of the most significant topics discussed during the convention was the issue of what the national government would look like going forward, and who would sit at its helm. Hamilton had a surprisingly unoriginal idea. In his opinion, the country should elect a president who would serve for life, much like British royalty, while also being subject to removal in the case of corruption. Suddenly, he wasn't so beloved. At best, others brushed off Hamilton's push for this new type of government. However, for those such as James Madison, the proposal amounted to that of a monarchist sympathiser, and a means to give power only to the rich and well-born. Madison's opinions spread until many other delegates spurned Hamilton as well. As such, he didn't get his way. Beyond a few of these proposals, Hamilton played a much smaller part in the proceedings of the Constitutional Convention. Additionally, he maintained some reservations about the finalised Constitution, but still viewed it as a much needed improvement over the Articles of Confederation and signed it. Furthermore, when push came to shove, he tried his best to defend the document. Hamilton and the other delegates had signed the new US Constitution, which was later ratified on June 21st, 1778, and Washington remained impressed. Having begun his appointment as the first president of the United States, Washington then asked Hamilton to fill the position of Secretary of the Treasury, which Hamilton accepted. He had big plans for the country's money. Tasked with creating a strategy to improve public credit, one of Hamilton's first designs separated America's debt into what qualified as state debt and national debt. Within that, he also categorized the national debt into foreign and domestic, the latter of which caused the most controversy. Still, Hamilton continued to push. Concerning the issue of debts held by the states, Hamilton positioned a suggestion that again caused some backlash. He believed that rather than depend on each state to pay its debt individually, it would be more practical to consolidate them with the national debt under the designation of federal debt. Meanwhile, the accusations of him being a monarchist were growing. Hamilton explored the concept of an American national bank for a while, and soon issued a report in its favour. He believed the model for this bank would be infallible, but at the same time, others pointed out its similarities to that of the Bank of England. However, one major change was that Hamilton's model diminished the government's involvement in public debt. Naturally, some fought against this. Although the Senate seemingly had no problem with Hamilton's vision for navigating America's debt, the plan's opposition quickly grew. Namely, Madison and Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson rejected the idea of a national bank, believing the rising sentiment that the system only benefited those in the Northeast. This led to more than a simple disagreement. Madison, Jefferson, and other like-minded individuals fought for the interests of the agrarians of the South, and Hamilton's plan seemed to leave them in the dark. As a divide became stronger between the two factions of belief, Hamilton emerged with his Federalist Party, while Jefferson and Madison created the Democratic Republican Party in 1792. Soon enough, Hamilton would face his own treachery. Hamilton's marriage appeared to be happy, and yet he began a year-long affair in 1791. In a plan that was likely devised by her husband, a woman named Maria Reynolds asked for Hamilton's financial help, leading to a romance between them. In exchange for keeping it a secret, her husband James Reynolds extorted regular payments from Hamilton. They seemed to get away with it, until some very public chickens came home to roost by Hamilton's own hand. Toward the end of 1792, the authorities charged James Reynolds and his associate Jacob Clingman with several unlawful acts, but Clingman had a trick up his sleeve. He alerted Congressman James Monroe to evidence allegedly held by James Reynolds, which he claimed was proof that Hamilton had also been involved in illicit activity. This was a concerning development indeed. Monroe took the alleged evidence against Hamilton seriously, and may have hoped to use it against him. Along with fellow Democratic Republicans Abraham Venable and Frederick Muhlenberg, he confronted Hamilton and accused him of financial speculation. In defense, Hamilton explained the affair and showed him the blackmail letter from Reynolds. In response to a journalist's claim in 1797 that he had been in collusion with James Reynolds, Hamilton urgently wrote Monroe and the other congressmen. Hoping to gain some reassurance, he asked them to confirm that nothing in the report would damage his integrity. But Monroe refused to answer. To get ahead of any potential scandal, Hamilton published a booklet containing every detail of his affair. Despite this scandal, many still favoured Hamilton. During America's conflict with France in 1798, the new president, John Adams, appointed Hamilton the Major General of the Army, albeit begrudgingly. Despite Adams' disdain for him, Hamilton had Washington's endorsement, along with a few others. Adams soon learned that even some in his cabinet were more devoted to Hamilton, so he fired them. This reputation made Hamilton integral to a later decision. By 1800, the public's view of John Adams had diminished, making it easy for Thomas Jefferson to defeat him in that year's election. Therefore, Jefferson's only opponent was Aaron Burr, but they tied in electoral college votes. As the House of Representatives needed to determine the winner, they turned to Hamilton for a final decision. In a move that shocked many, Hamilton endorsed his former adversary, Jefferson. This caused a lethal rift. Despite many of their disagreements, Hamilton made his chosen endorsement because he believed Burr was a mischievous enemy, making Jefferson the lesser of two evils. Naturally, Burr felt his honour was put into question and demanded that Hamilton make things right. After much correspondence, Hamilton still refused to atone. Burr responded with a challenge. Once Burr challenged Hamilton to a duel, honour kept him from refusing. The two met on the Hudson River bank, coincidentally near where Hamilton's son Philip perished in a previous duel. The two lined up and fired. But while Hamilton seemingly threw away his shot by aiming above Burr, he took the latter's shot above his right hip. This was the end of him. In another coincidence, the surgeon who had attended his son Philip now treated Hamilton before moving him back across the Hudson and to a boarding house in Greenwich Village. There he lay, knowing his end was near, and thus summoning his loved ones. Over the next 31 hours, they came to his side and bid him goodbye until he passed on July 12th. As far as his legacy, no one can deny that Hamilton left an impact. In his time as Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton developed the foundations for a lasting financial system in the face of contemporary criticism. This controversy continued, as economists and historians have debated the efficiency of his centralized banking to this day. Thanks for watching History Exposé. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.